so great to see everyone coming from all over the world for this very historic event, the Festschrift of Arie Kruglanski. And I'd just like to first welcome the Dean, Gregory Ball, to come up and make a few remarks, followed by our chair, Jack Blanchard, before we kick off the talks.
Thank you so much, Michelle. So I'm really delighted that I was invited to make some observations about one of the most distinguished faculty member here in this department, in this college, and in this university. So as Michelle said, I'm Greg Ball. I'm the guy lucky enough to be the Dean of the College of Behavioral and Social Sciences. And I took over the job about 2 years ago, and I'm actually a psychologist myself. I'm a biological psychologist or behavioral neuroscientist, but you know, I've been in the field my entire life, and when you come to a new place, I'd known about Maryland for many years. I used to work at another institution right up the road. You try to size up, you know, who do you have in the faculty and everything, and Arie quickly emerged as I did my various analyses as one of our stars. And you know, it's funny, when you go into academic administration, you're called upon to kind of quantify academic achievement, and we all bristle at that in somehow because you know, there's a gestalt where we know people are impactful and trying to assign numbers, you know, like number of papers, number of grant dollars, and number of students trained, and this, that, and even the H-index. All these things somehow, you know, we feel like they take away from the overall tremendous things that our respective colleagues do. And you know, in the case of Arie, as I sort of looked at all the impressive numbers associated with his career, one of the things as I got older that I hadn't appreciated is how difficult it is to sustain an active, creative research program. When I was a young pup, I would, you know, very arrogantly say, well, blah, 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 lost his grant, you know, what kind of thing is that, and this person's not publishing anymore. And then as my career went on, I said, God, this is really hard. I got to come up with a new idea, and Jesus, how did people do this? And you know, when you look at Arie, and you look at his CV, when does he emerge on the scene in a formal way? 1966, you know, with the Woodrow Wilson Fellowship. 50 years. This man has been consistently a player, and he has the big, you know, the big hits, the home runs, you know, the ideas that have made an impact, the cognitive closure and things like that. But he's also, if you just look at it, he has been there as a player for half a century in the field of social psychology. And you know, that is really a tremendous achievement, and something that, you know, I as a dean, more than, oh, they're in the newspaper or this kind of thing, you have someone you can rely on who's going to be a leader in the field, who's going to sit there and work with people and do that year after year and always stay up with things. It's just remarkable. So I wanted to just leave with that. Arie, we're delighted to honor you. We're delighted you're here. I know you said you're not done, and I couldn't be happier to hear that. So please enjoy this wonderful assemblage of your colleagues and friends. So thank you.
Last night when I was at the reception with folks, what impressed me was the diversity of individuals from all over the world. And I think that this reflects Arie's scholarly achievements and his collaborations, but I also think it reflects Arie as a person. He's genuinely likable. People enjoy working with him, talking with him, engaging with him. And I think for him to be able to do that on a global level intimidates me and humbles me. I have a hard enough time doing that with people in my own neighborhood. So I think that that's a wonderful achievement itself on a personal level. The dean talked about ways that we can look at certain metrics of achievement. And in some ways that can trivialize someone's achievements, but I also think in some ways it can really, in a very stark way, show what someone is capable of. And when you look at Arie's achievements, I didn't print out a CV because I think that would contribute to global warming and deforestation. You know, he has 69 book chapters in his CV, 248 peer-reviewed publications, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the pattern of his publications. If you look at his grant awards, what's interesting about his scholarship and his ideas is that they're appealing to so many different kinds of agencies, whether it's the Department of Defense Naval Research and interested in terrorism and how we understand conflict, or whether it's just basic ideas in social psychology and motivation and thinking and interpersonal relationships and funding by NSF and NIH and private foundations like the Templeton Foundation. And he's been persistently, as the dean noted, funded. He funds students, he funds postdocs, and again, I think this shows the importance of his ideas, that foundations and government agencies want to make sure that we can learn more about Arie and his work, and his ideas continue to have an impact on the field. If you look at his honors, again, it's quite the list. He was inducted to the Social and Personality Psychology's Wall of Fame. He's a recipient of the University of Maryland System Regents Faculty Award for Research Scholarship and Creative Activity. He's a distinguished university professor, the recipient of the Revez Chair, University of Amsterdam, the Humboldt Lifetime Achievement Award. I could go on, the Donald T. Campbell Award for Distinguished Scientific Contributions to Social Psychology, et cetera. And when I look at all of this, and your research includes motivation, and I really have a question of what motivates Arie, because I think if we could figure this out, I'd like to share it with some of my faculty colleagues to see if we can have, and myself, quite honestly, if we could have an impact across the college. If you look at Arie's publications through 2001, you see a very nice record of someone having a 30-plus year career. And coincident with this time, he was awarded the Distinguished University Professor position in 2003, the Donald T. Campbell Award for Distinguished Scientific Contributions in 1999, the Humboldt Lifetime Achievement Award in 2003. So why didn't you say, it's time to go travel and hit the golf course and relax, go to the beach? And that's what I think many people do. And again, as the dean noted, as an administrator, I have perspective on lots of people's careers, including my own, and we tend to slowly fade into the sunset, and we have declining contributions, and that's fine. That's expected. What's puzzling and shocking about Arie, when I looked at this, I kept looking back at the numbers and saying, is there something wrong here? And I went back to his CV, and I was actually looking at, and I was thinking, what the hell? This explosion. It's not just a kind of maintenance of productivity, it's this explosion of productivity and the collaborations and the diversity of ideas at a time, again, when most of us are resting on our laurels and our achievements and enjoying hard-won rest. And instead, you've done somehow the opposite. And this is also reflected in your citations by year. And normally, again, we start to see a fade off as people become less productive and we don't see so much. And again, it's this continued, not just continued, it's not just sustained, it's this escalating impact on the field. And as department chair, I enjoy when we talk about the department and our achievements to my dean, to the provost, to others. I'm able to say, Arie is a member of my department, and he's a colleague of mine, and it reflects well on our department, so I thank you for that. One of the games that we play in my department office is, where in the world is Arie? Because he's achieving all this and traveling all the time. I told Arie this morning I want some of his frequent flyer miles. It's just remarkable. And again, I think it reflects, as I was saying before, the friendships that you've created, the scholarship that you have, and the desire that people have to want to work with you. And that this has just generated more and more research, the exchange of ideas on a global level. I think it's great for the field. And selfishly, it's great for our department that we have that kind of recognition and global impact because of what you've done. So I thank you for spending your career with us. And as you pointed out to me, this is not the end. This event usually signifies, okay, I'm done. You reminded me that that's not going to happen, and you have a busy itinerary this summer. So again, thank you, and I look forward to continued explosive growth and contribution. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm just going to make some remarks. Welcome again, everyone from all over the world who came to honor and come to this Festschrift for Arie Kruglanski. Festschrift is a celebration of writing, and it was a tradition that started in Germany around 1890. to celebrate the academic life of dear colleagues. Typically, it happens around the time that people are retiring, but as we know, Arie will never retire. So finally, I said, enough is enough. We have to locomote, and we have to put this event together. And what's exciting is that I think all of us have very different experiences working with Arie, but I think by the end of the day, we'll see this really pretty clear shared reality, as Tori would say, about who this person is to us as a friend, as a colleague, and how much he's influenced us in such profound ways. I think we all share the perception that he's a Renaissance man. He's a man of many talents and many bodies of knowledge, and he's a force of life. He won't admit it, but he also likes to wear tights. We see so many talents of his. He's obviously a lover of languages, speaks many, many different languages. He's a great athlete. Here he is as a black belt in karate. He still does karate. I make fun of him telling him he's like on Seinfeld, he's always trying to beat up little kids. He is also a great skier. Many people in this room ski with him in Utah and in St. Moritz and elsewhere. He is a great tennis player. Here he's just beat my father and my brother. They're not too happy about this. He's also a phenomenal dancer with his bride, Hannah, here. He's a lover of many different types of music, from Bach, Baroque, to salsa, to jazz. And he's a lover, as many of us know, and benefit from his knowledge. He's a lover of great food and great wine. And he's a great chef. No, I'm just kidding. He's probably never even cooked an egg in his life, I think Hannah would say, right? As a scientist, though, I think we also share the perception that he is a lion. And this is his self-declared name. Here it is in Hebrew. I hope I'm spelling it right. And this is where he just inspires us just tremendously. He's fearless. He's very courageous. He is broad-minded and interdisciplinary. And for many of us, he's a visionary. He goes into territory far before any of us think about this and has sort of premonitions about where the field needs to go. He's very far-reaching, but he's able to get to the gist, bringing together ideas that have remained isolated in the field. And he does travel a lot. In the world of science, he travels on the road less traveled, often raising controversies that really need to be raised and doing some very deep theoretical work that often means that he'll get attacked and has to defend himself. Here he is preparing for that when he's a young kid, actually. He's getting ready to do battle. We also share the perception that this is a person that's really fully committed. He also studies commitment. He's a fully committed friend, colleague, mentor. He has a ton of energy, and he's just a lover of science, so he will put that energy at work anywhere he is. Here he is in the Golan Heights, and he, during his spare time, was writing a psych review, actually, that came out. This is a true story, actually. We also know Arie as the locomotor, and I think also who has an assessment deficit sometimes, Hannah would say. So here he is locomoting. He was at the grocery store and he forgot to put the groceries inside the car, so he's driving off with the groceries. And here he is actually at a gas station, driving away with the nozzle in the car. Actually, I would say this is a statistical interaction between need for closure and locomotion. And it's been replicated time and time again, so Brian Nosek would be very happy about that. Here's just one other example of this. This is actually in Israel, where he threw out his final exams by accident. I think he just didn't want to grade them, but he did befriend the janitor and asked him to help him find the final exams. But I think most importantly for many of us, was here to celebrate his personhood. This is a person who's a lover of life. Here he is in a very dire circumstance as a young kid in Poland, still with a great smile on his face. He's a person with great generosity, a big heart, extremely modest. And I think he's got an amazing sense of humor that keeps us laughing a lot. And here he is telling his three turtle joke that many of you are also probably confused about, whether the turtle is lying. But these are just all these attributes from the Renaissance man to the lion, to the locomotor, the fully committed, and the lover of life. This is all in one person, and we're just so deeply honored to be part of your life, everyone here, I'm sure. And I do want to just also thank the village that it takes, the whole family that's behind this man. This is Arie's family, his kids, his grandkids, and his beautiful wife, who stood by him and helped support him through everything for 40 plus years. and who's a dear friend. And really just thank you for being here and for taking great care of him. And I welcome everyone again. This is now, I think we're passing the torch on to the next speaker, and enjoy the day. Thank you.
I think I have one honor, and which is possibly to have known you longer than anyone in this room outside of his wife. I think we've been back and forth for about 36 years, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful trip, and I count on it continuing. We first met Arie when I think Mary and I were in Heidelberg, had a position there for a year, and Arie was in Mannheim. And we heard he was giving a talk and thought, well, this is a guy who's really alive, on fire, let's go over and hear him. And indeed, it was a joy. You've heard him speak before, a sparkling speaker, curious, interesting, engaged, and so intelligent. So we invited him over for dinner in Heidelberg, and met Hannah, and it was just fantastic spark among the four of us. I think that may be the first of about 500 dinners over the years, and every one of them has been a joy. You have to realize, though, that a lot of the energy here is born of difference, but difference with a certain kind of appreciation for the other. And it's one of the things I've really enjoyed about our relationship. I think both of us have had a vision of social psychology, of what was worth doing in the world, and they varied. They overlapped in terms of wanting to see something come that was good, coming out of this field, coming out of our work, but varied in terms of the kind of emphases. And it's no new schism for social psychologists. It's the difference between, in some sense, favoring the social process as opposed to individual process. And for many of us who were in the social camp, the early paper on whatever happened to the social and social psychology is telling. But appreciating each other for that. One can get a sense of this by, here's another Arie story. One of my favorites. Anybody who's ever had Arie over for overnight knows that by the time you've had a shower in the morning and brushed your teeth and shaved, he's written yet another paper.
Colleagues and friends, dear ladies and gentlemen, you see, I prepared kind of an official talk, and I have some transparency. They open up here. And yeah, it's a great honor to me to be here to celebrate Arie. We have heard a lot of his achievements already, and it's also a great pleasure for me because I came to know Arie as a good teacher, great teacher, as a great mentor to me, and also as a great friend, as you may have inferred from the pictures here. And the second reason it is a pleasure is a paper that I studied when I was a young doctoral student. Maybe Arie doesn't know about it. So it's also a very personal thing today to present this. I studied this paper when I was interested in social influence phenomena.
So here's another thing that's great about Arie. So you come here as his student or postdoc, he works with you, it's his job. But he also works with people who randomly approach him at conferences and ask him for a coffee and a chat. And, it takes a coffee to spark an amazing, productive collaboration. And that's pretty much what happened with Arie, who was not his student, was not his postdoc. He was a PhD student going to SPSP, who asked Arie to give him some of his precious times, and he did. And he took a coffee to have this amazing collaboration on Need for Closure. So Arie is coming from Belgium, from University of Ghent, and is going to tell us all about his work on Need for Closure that was sparked during that coffee meeting at SPSP in 2005. And so I asked Arnie for a picture of him and Arie, and he sent me this. And I was like, okay, is there a story behind this? And I was like, no. So I was like, okay, trying to use my imagination. Is this like really need for ultimate closure, like enclosure in astronaut costume, or is like the next step in locomotion, like going to the moon, whatever it is. It's a really cool picture, and with that, please welcome Arnie.
Well, there is no story behind that picture. I just thought it had to be something very spectacular because Arie is a very spectacular person and has been very important in my academic life and career. So I want to talk to you actually about the year 1980 because it's my favorite year. Nothing too spectacular happened in 1980 in the history of mankind, but it was the fabulous year where Arie published his psychological review paper on lay epistemic theory, and it was also the year in which I was born. So here we are, 36 years later, and I'm very honored to be invited here to talk about that specific theory, lay epistemic theory, and particularly about the most fruitful branch on that tree, need for cognitive closure. Need for closure is among the many contributions Arie has made to the field. Need for closure is, at least in my opinion, arguably the biggest contribution. And if you're not convinced by the hundreds, even thousands of citations to his work on need for closure in the scientific literature, having your concept pitched as the title and the main concept of an episode of the most viewed sitcom of our times kind of settles the deal. This is an episode from The Big Bang Theory, which is titled The Closure Alternative, and is all about need for Sheldon's excessive need for compulsive closure. Well, I guess since you're all close friends and colleagues of Arie, you are at least familiar with the fundamentals or the basic ideas about need for closure. But just in a nutshell, need for closure is the desire for an answer on a given topic. Any answer is better than remaining in a state of confusion and uncertainty. As such, it's kind of a desire for epistemic security. Need for closure can be incited by situational circumstances such as noise and time pressure, but also there are individual differences representing chronic differences or chronic levels of need for cognitive closure, which can be measured with the need for closure scale, of course. And there are two general tendencies: urgency, or the need to reach a conclusion quickly, which often leads to seizing behavior, and permanence, which is about holding on to obtained conclusions, which leads often to freezing. Well, there are many effects or phenomena in social psychology and well beyond that are at least influenced by need for closure. Some of them are listed here: less information seeking, more impressional primacy, more stereotyping, and so on and so on. Actually, I could fill a whole morning just listing all the possible effects of need for closure, but no worries, I won't do that.
This is Ayelet Fischbach, and I want you to be like her. It's like, okay. Ayelet had just received the CESP Dissertation Award, and little I knew that she's going to become an amazing scholar, a superstar in the field. But at that point, I had no idea that the first goal that Arie had for me was doomed to fail. So he set up me for failure because nobody could be like Ayelet. So she left the lab, soon became full professor at Chicago, and she continued to do amazing work. Her publication record is nothing short of impressive, and she's probably one of the best experimentalists I know. But that's not what Ayelet is. Ayelet is an amazing human being. She's so kind, so supportive, so nice. She did all the work while raising 3 kids. What can I say? She clearly knows her goal pursuit. So please welcome Ayelet Fishba.
Thank you. Wow, I'm so moved by this introduction. Kata, that's so nice. And what a picture. So I don't have a picture with you, not because we didn't take any, but we never really said goodbye. So this is when you take the picture that you keep. And I don't think I will say goodbye today. So I don't anticipate that we'll have that picture even after today. But let me say just a few things before I move to research that I don't envy the organizers of this event. I think that doing such an event for Arie is not easy because he's not a nostalgic person. He's not very sentimental. He's not really. No, I try to talk to him about the past. Usually that lasts for 5 minutes, and then it's like, okay, so where do we move? Present and future. That's where his mind is. So you talked about being like Arie being courageous. I think that having him sit here for a full day and hearing about things in the past, like you are courageous too. Let's hope he stays in the room. So I will talk about the present and the future very soon. I promise to. I'll just say that my very first meeting with Arie was in the year 2000. It was my very first week in the U.S. I knew nothing. I could not envision that a university, that a campus can be that large, that the building can be that confusing. So I was late for our meeting. I was also sweaty because I was running. And Arie is telling me that everything will be great. I will be great, and we are going to have so much fun. And I'm thinking, like, there's nothing about this day so far that suggests that this is true. Like, there's no, and you're talking to someone who is late and sweaty, so why do you think you will enjoy that much? And it was a few months later, I think, that I realized that he was not trying to predict the future. He was just being Arie, which means this is where we start. Okay? We start with the assumption that everything is going to be great, that we are really going to enjoy ourselves, that it will be fun, and we just go from there. And when Kata, in your introduction, I could actually hear Arie saying that, no? Like there are so many great people around, and you will be great, and everything will be terrific. So I dedicated the title of my talk to Arie. We are doing this work because we really can think of a better thing to do when we get up in the morning. It's really fun to sit with other people and think about ideas. It's fun to write these papers. So someone mentioned that Arie gets up in the morning and write. It's because he really cannot think of anything more fun to do when he gets up in the morning, right? It's not because he's a hard-working individual. I mean, he's traveling all the time. Come on. So
Last time I saw Ed and Arie together, they were hanging out by some trash cans in Tunisia, of all places. So don't ask me what they're doing there by the trash cans. All I know is that they're actually attending a conference. I was there too, and although you could not tell that by the flamingos in the background, that was actually a conference center. So with that being said, I'll pass the mic to Ed and let him tell us all about his research.
So, just before I started graduate school, Arie had published Goal Systems Theory. And one thing he doesn't know is that before lab meetings, we would often make bets about how long it would take for him to start drawing circles on the board to represent goals and means. So, in these conversations, we will often talk about the relations between goals and means and what happens if you have multiple goals associated to a single means. And some other researchers made the observation, so Ayelet and Jim Shah and Grania Fitzsimmons observed that people can serve as means to goals. And that was an idea that has captured my attention. So my talk today will focus on what I think are some interesting implications of considering people as means to goals. The first observation I'd like to make is that every goal a person pursues is facilitated by another person. There's nothing that we do that is not helped along by another person. The other observation I'd like to make is that every time we initiate contact with somebody else, we expect them to help us on our goal pursuit. Sometimes that's quite clear. You want them to help you with a specific task. Sometimes you just phone a friend and you don't have a specific goal consciously in mind. Still, though, you're expecting them to do something for you, alleviate your boredom, regulate your emotions, or otherwise just simply entertain you. So every interaction we have with another person is a form of goal pursuit, and every goal pursuit that we have is a form of interpersonal interaction. So recently, with my colleague Mandy Forrest at the University of Pittsburgh, we've developed this idea that relationships with other people should be satisfying when both members of the relationship experience mutual perceived instrumentality. That is, when both people feel that they themselves are useful to the other person, and when they feel that the other person is useful to them. So they're both experiencing the sense that they are instrumental and that the other person is instrumental to each other.
I want to remind everybody of something that hasn't been said recently about Arie, which is that he has the most cosmopolitan and gourmet tastes, and many of my wonderful experiences with him have been being the beneficiary of his restaurant research all over the world. And so I want to just reiterate how important that's been. But you can see, it's obvious to everybody what a productive scientist he's been and what a dedicated mentor. I want to mention something that people may not know, is that I think he has the record among social psychologists for publishing in Psych Review. I counted 8 occasions. I mean, who does that? Only Arie. So I want to say about that I am endogenously motivated to seek evidence of Arie's epistemologic logic, seizing the answer that I can freeze, consistent with our shared group centrism, which is the same rule-based process, whether intuitive or deliberate, because both the force field drives me and I have the energy to overcome any restraining forces. So I'm motivationally ready to move from an attitude of liking Arie and his work to wanting its celebration. Therefore, having a dominant goal to toast him, which makes me choose this behavior. L'chaim.
So, thank you very much for inviting me to be a distinguished toaster. I must admit, at the beginning, I wasn't really sure what I was supposed to do, whether this is something at breakfast or something like that. But it is an occasion for me to tell you that at least on one dimension, I'm ahead of Arie. That's the only dimension, that I've had a Festschrift already, you know. And we talked this morning, and whether there's life after Festschrift, and we did, yes, and now I've learned life may start afresh after Festschrift. Anyway, I'm really glad to be here, and I consider myself very exceptionally fortunate to have Arie as a professional, a personal friend, as a companion and role model for my entire career. It all started in 1981, we've already mentioned it, when he, together with Hannah, came to Mannheim as a guest professor, and I know it took Arie a little time to get accustomed to the more liberal rules that we have had in Mannheim, for example, when it came to swimming and seas and things like that. I'm not going any further, but maybe you know the story. Okay, and we really shared a great number of intellectual, cultural, culinary, and even athletic pleasures. Intellectually, I admired his really outstanding epistemic sophistication. Even if we do not agree on everything when it comes to psychology, we have some different views, you know, the dual, you know. Anyway, but I'm still a fan of the unimodel, you know, and I admit that freely. Okay, culturally, I can think of nobody, and this has already been mentioned before, who has more friends and colleagues in so many nations and speaks so many languages. But also culturally, I admire the elegance of his dancing with Hannah, and it even at one time attracted the Swiss television, you know, to ask him whether they would come again the next day. Unfortunately, he couldn't, so they could take some shots of their dancing. And also, the selection of his clothes, you know, I'm always, and I'm completely, you know, hopeless. So he's not a role model, he's just a standard, and I feel really bad sometimes. Anyway, culinarily, I think he has introduced me to the intricacies of the Italian cuisine, and I think it was here in Washington, and I discovered the rucola salad, you know. And also he introduced me to the complexity of many wines, even Mosel and German Riesling. I've heard that's his delight more recently. And yes, we've also had an athletic commonality. We went skiing together. We run down mogul runs in Utah, in Switzerland, in Austria, and who knows where else. And in the 90s, early 90s, Arie and I spent a week skiing in St. Moritz, and there we decided in the Hotel Laudinella that we should have a spring conference, a ski conference, to combine intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and goals. And well, we did it. And now it's this year the 12th time that we have this ski conference now organized. Marino is one of the new organizers, and it's going to happen next year in Cortina d'Ampezzo. So please sign up, and we're happy to have you. So, dear Arie, I'd like to raise my glass, or the cup anyway, and to thank you. Everything I owe you, and that's a lot. And at the same time, I want to extend my best wishes for you, and also a little bit egotistically also for me to spend more time with you and Hannah, and I'm looking forward to see you next time in Landau, my hometown.
Thank you. At the beginning, there's a smile. The beginning, and then it's been followed by Arie, and yeah, on a bike that was eventually replaced by skis and who knows what. But the smile has remained. That it's this kind of smile, that's what sticks to me. I mean, it's kind of, whenever he meets you with that smile, it's like celebrates the moment of you, your presence makes the world great. I mean, this guy, and this kind of eagerness to, what do you have to say? I want to hear what you have to say. You feel like compelled to say what is on your mind to him. High and low. You don't have the feeling he wants first, he takes it out for you. So what is on your mind? Let me know. The smile, listening to you, that is something that has followed me since, yeah, it was 69 when we first met for a brief period, and you sent me to work with another lodge, Łódź professor. And it turns out my parents had a life in Łódź, so what's going on here? From a Łódź to a Łódź, off a Łódź. Yes, so, right, so so this is what was the impact, and the huge impact you have had on my academic life. And I was blessed that years later we became very close friends, you and Hannah. So. But the question is, what about you? How do we deconstruct you? You had an impact on me. And what is it that makes you tick? So I mean, everybody has a guess. It will have to be a very parsimonious explanation. Very parsimonious. So I have a hunch, and the hunch is that it started even before '69, where we met 46 years ago. It started much earlier. I think what was formative for you was that you were a drummer. That's a fact. The inferences is now up to us, but that's a fact. It's a factual, that you were a drummer. So what is a drummer doing? He creates the rhythm. He creates the beat. A drummer is the unifying force of an ensemble. You can have only one drummer, one rhythm. You can have all kinds of music, all kinds, doing harmonies, etc. You cannot have two rhythms in a piece of music, like you cannot imagine a symphony orchestra having two conductors. That is not usually not possible. So it's this, and it's the deep structure of music, not only music, it's a deep structure of music and of dance, and probably of many forms because it's so elemental. And I think that somehow is a theme that goes through your work, both as a contributor to science and a curator of science, in the way you judge other people. Let's stick to what is fundamental, and you are so observant to see whether someone goes off beat and starts trying to describe the social mind in terms of bias here, bias there, effect here, effect there. For you, that's my feeling, is like, okay, we are creating a cacophony here. And let's go back to the basic beat with our basic elements. And that is the way we should approach, not as elaborating on all kinds of specific things, specific effects. And it's like trying to get Gulliver being subdued by small stitches. No, that doesn't work. And whenever you do it, you'll hear from Arie, because he'll show that if I go to the basic beat, I'll undo the thing that you think is real about people. So you really have to watch for that. And it's true, and it's in your development, obviously, in your insistence on distinction between process and content. What is it? It's the rhythm, the basic beat, versus the elaboration that has to follow from it, and your elegant models like the goal system model, and your resistance to having more than one thing, the dual model. No, you're model. And like I said, yes, you made Kelly a special case of your more general theory. You made my theory a special case of a mistake. And I felt so honored. Honored. Because I know the initial task you gave me, we didn't even had a lab, so we met at your home, and you said, okay, you guys, it's me and another Arie, we're this first Arie ever. You rule out this motivational explanation, and we worked hard to realize later that he's the one who developed the motivation as the theory of everything. So let me try to stop here and say what? There are cities one loves to get lost in. I love to get lost in Paris. I get to learn that it's great to be lost in Rome. But if I would like to be lost with someone, it will be with you. Because first, we are likely to get lost. Second, it's nice to get even lost in thought with you. So, cheers. Love you.
Arie was working on locomotion and assessment when he was with you. Because Arie told me the story that when you were skiing, you said, no, you said, let's go to Diabolezza. Well, Diabolezza sounds like a very nice mountain or something. Never asking for anything. What's Diabolezza? You walk for 2 hours to get to a place, you know, on a very narrow path, to get to a place where you ski on moguls for 2 more hours. Then you have to carry your skis and go again another 2 hours. So that's locomotion. Assessment, null, 0. And the other time, I think when you were skiing and suddenly there is no Arie, it's just at the bottom of the hill where he went off piece or off peak down to some kind of an abyss. So he had more locomotion experiences with you. I'm not sure I want to thank you for that or not, but he's still alive.
So I guess most of you know what this means, right? I think Ed alluded to it a little bit during his talk. I'm not sure if you quite pictured it. You probably think, well, this is gold systems. It is, but it's also something that I see on the board every week during lab meeting for 6 years, over and over again. And this was not enough. Now they have it on T-shirts too. So it's not just in the lab. It's going everywhere. So yes, 6 years of gold systems, 6 years of these circles on the board. It made me think that, well, it's all about goals. This is all there is. So yeah, when you wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go for a run in a 20-degree Fahrenheit cold, yeah, that is about goals. If you happen to run with Arie, it becomes goals reach a completely different dimension, because at 6:30 he's already had his coffee, he read the paper, practiced his Arabic, and it could very well happen that he just came back from a trip to Singapore, and he doesn't complain that he's jet-lagged or anything like that. No, he complains that he could not get up on one ski while he was water skiing in Singapore or Indonesia or wherever it was. So yeah, so you know, it is about goals, and some people have many of them, and some of them are really very, very high up there. But you know, what about other behaviors? I'm sure we all agree that these are goals. They're wonderful goals to pursue and achieve. But what about other things that people do, like alcohol and drug use, unsafe sexual behavior, driving under the influence, overeating, self-harm? Like, these are things that we typically approach as self-regulatory failures, as things that people do because they cannot pursue their more important overarching goals. So they fail, so they engage in these behaviors. Well, as I said, maybe not. Maybe there is something about goals when you think about these behaviors too. So together with Ed, we started to explore this idea, and we sketch our framework in a recent paper. And the idea is that even when we engage in this kind of behaviors that seem counterproductive, seem self-defeating, because you know, the immediate benefit is very small compared to the long-term cost, what if people try to pursue or achieve something when they engage in these behaviors?
So for the first 2 years of graduate school, Arie reminded me as often as he possibly could that I was a lousy writer. he would catch me in the hallway and say, "You just need to work on your writing. You're not a very good writer." And then to soften the blow, he would say, "You know, it's okay. Most grad students are lousy writers. The only good writer was John Jost." I don't know what the parameters on the only are, like in the world or among his former students and postdocs, but the only good writer is John Jost.
No pressure, no pressure.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Ed. Arie, you've got to stop using your former students to beat up your current students. That's not really appropriate pedagogical behavior, my friend. It really is a tremendous honor and a pleasure for me to be here to pay tribute to one of my favorite people in the world, a mentor, an idol, a friend, a true mensch. My encounters with Arie and his wonderfully involved partner in everything, Hannah, have been among the best, most gratifying experiences I've had in 25 years in social psychology. So I'm really eternally grateful for your friendship and your support, and very happy to have this chance to share with you just a bit of what those interactions have meant to me and to my work. So, thank you. So this project of understanding political ideology as a form of motivated social cognition began soon after I arrived here in College Park as one of Arie's postdocs. Though I hardly recognize the inside of the building at all. It's really nice now. Arie had hired me over the telephone at the very end of a fascinating conversation, which always struck me as a very debonair move on his part. And he asked me to be one of the 4 postdocs in his lab at the time. Which he called us the dream team, called us at the time. Arie recognized my interest in political psychology and therefore pitched me the most exciting and excitable, that is controversial, project that I've ever had the intellectual pleasure of working on. But it enabled me to integrate formerly disparate interests on left-right ideology, social cognition, stereotyping, bias and error, and the causes and consequences of system defensive motivation. Arie wanted to know, quite simply, if psychological conservatism, including the need for cognitive closure, the cognitive motivational tendency to seize and freeze on information that is highly salient, familiar, accessible, preliminary, or convenient. I think Arie did a terrific job of summarizing that today. Whether psychological conservatism, including these tendencies, would be associated with political conservatism, the ideological tendency to defend and justify aspects of the societal status quo with its attendant degree of hierarchy, structure, order, and inequality. And I reckon that the answer to this question was yes. And I set about trying to find every study from the 1950s on that addressed the question. And I found 88 studies carried out between 1958 and 2002, and here's what they showed. Aggregating across dozens of studies carried out by many different research teams and over 22,000 individual cases or participants from 12 different countries, we observed that the motivation to reduce uncertainty was indeed correlated with political conservatism. So specifically intolerance of ambiguity and stronger personal needs for order, structure, and closure were all positively associated with the endorsement of more conservative attitudes. Integrative complexity, openness to new experiences, and tolerance for uncertainty were all negatively associated with conservative attitudes or positively associated with liberal attitudes. In terms of existential as well as epistemic motivation, we also found that greater fear of threat and loss, death anxiety, and exposure to system threat were positively associated with conservatism or negatively associated with liberalism, and low self-esteem was very weakly associated with conservatism. We published our review in Psychological Bulletin in 2003 under the title of Political Conservatism as Motivated Social Cognition, and the rest, as they say, is history. As it turned out, the article reignited vigorous debates, some of which are still raging, about authoritarianism, dogmatism, cognitive rigidity, and the covariation of psychological characteristics and political beliefs, opinions, and values. According to Google Scholar, this article has been cited well over 2,000 times, which makes it not only my most highly cited paper, but also Arie's most highly cited paper, believe it or not. That surprised me. And if our goal in publishing this article was to stimulate more research on the psychology of political ideology, and I think certainly that was one of our goals, then I would say that we've succeeded beyond our wildest expectations.
All right, hello everybody. It's my distinct pleasure to be here today to pay tribute to my mentor, Arie. But first of all, my heartfelt thank you to the organizer of this Festschrift event. I mean, you guys really pulled it off very well. And also the lineup of speakers today has been quite amazing. So you guys are a tough act to follow. So this will be my modest contribution to Arie's Festschrift. I'm going to talk about the rise and fall of violent extremism. So because of the time that's being imparted to me, I'm going to only own in on 4 points on terrorism. First of all, I'm going to talk about academic research. Duh, but mind you, terrorism has been quite plagued by the lack of substantial empirical evidence. So throughout my talk, I'll be talking about the research that Arie has been conducting. And also, of course, I'm going to talk about radicalization, right? This is like the process you ought to understand if you want to predict whether people are going to engage in violent extremism, in violence. And also, it's the process you ought to understand in order to develop I would say effective interventions to help people disengage from violent extremism. In other words, I'll be talking about implicit and also explicit de-radicalization. In other words, I'll be talking about Arie. And of course, you guys are a captive audience, so I'm sure it's not going to be very difficult to convince you that Arie is a pioneer, but also among the visionaries of the field. And also, mind you, in the word visionaries, there's also the word Arie. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. All right, so I'm going to talk about terrorism. So it's about 260 definition according to Easton and Schmidt, and of course I'm not going to cover them all today. But if you were to walk across campus, I mean literally you just cross the street, go to the Start Center here at the University of Maryland. This is the definition that they're using, and also it's my favorite one. They say that terrorism is the threatened or actual use of illegal force and violence by a non-state actor to attain a political, economic, religious, or social goal through fear, coercion, or intimidation. So what is radicalization? What is this animal? So let me give you another definition. So it's a process whereby individuals are introduced to an overtly ideological message and belief system that encourages movement from moderate mainstream belief toward extreme views. And of course, that's a normal process, right? It's not a big deal to espouse, like, perhaps a divergent system of belief. Law enforcement agencies, or just focus on the idea that if you think that using violence is a method to effect societal change, that's the problem. Not the idea per se, but the actual behavior. And that's what we call violent extremism.
I want to elaborate a little bit about what you told about Kentucky Fried Chicken. With Professor Michel Gelfand and Professor Arie Kruglanski, I visited Bikutan. Bikutan is the high-value detention center for Abu Sayyaf terrorist group, and also a group called the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, and there's another group called the Raja Soleiman Revolutionary Movement. In fact, the Raja Soleiman Revolutionary Movement is the group that did the worst maritime terrorist attack. In one attack, they killed 118 people. And in fact, Arie and Michel both interviewed the man who placed the bomb on board Super Ferry 14. He brought a television which was explosive rigged, and then he put a cup of tea, and then he left the Super Ferry. And ticket collectors who came saw a television, a hot cup of tea, and thought the passenger may have gone to the restroom. So after some time, the Super Ferry exploded. So both Arie and Michel interviewed some of the high-value detainees. And I want to share with you that these detainees, the food is not good. So Arie used many techniques to get them to cooperate and collaborate. Some techniques are very deliberate, and one was he asked one of our staff just find out what they like to eat. So they said, we like to eat Kentucky Fried Chicken. Then he ordered Kentucky Fried Chicken. And after they ate Kentucky Fried Chicken, they whenever now I go to Bikutan prison, they ask me, when is that Professor Arie coming? Because they want to eat Kentucky Fried Chicken. I don't have so. Yeah, I don't have so much of money to buy them Kentucky Fried Chicken. But Arie explained the psychology of it. That is, he said that you can reach the heart through the stomach. So we developed a new approach to rehabilitation called food rehabilitation. And food rehabilitation is a very effective method of rehabilitation. In fact, some terrorists, we used to take them to 5-star hotels. And after they eat, they become your best friends. So I want to tell you that this is one of the experiments, human experiments that Arie carried out, which was very successful, and this was deliberately done.
So our next speaker will be Tori Higgins, one of Arie's closest friends and intellectual colleagues. They developed the theory of regulatory mode together, and if I remember the story correctly, it involves skiing. As I remember the story, Arie and Tori were skiing on one of the coldest days, and they reached the top of the hill where they were to ski down, and Arie, in typical locomotor fashion, just jumped down the hill. Tori, in the more assessor style, adjusted his equipment, made sure things were right, assessed the scene, and then ultimately started moving. In order to spend time with Arie, Tori reminds us that you have to play the role of assessor, because Arie will locomote, and if you don't play the role of assessor, he'll just go wherever he goes and then ask questions later, sometimes too late. So if you want to practice your assessment tendencies, just spend some time with Arie, and you'll know your role that day. Please join me in welcoming Tori.
Yeah, well, that's one of Arie's favorite stories, although he says it a little differently. When he tells that story, it comes out a little bit more like, boy, Tori's really annoying. And because his version of the story, which happens to be, in fact, the case, was that he didn't go right away. He sat there, stood there, waiting for me to, as he likes to show, each finger. This is the way he likes to tell the story. Sorry. So his version of the story is only a little exaggerated, but this was literally, this was at Killington, this particular story, and it was literally 25 below zero, and we were 2 of maybe 10 people on the entire mountain, because nobody else would ever ski under those conditions. So the fact that we're at the very top and I'm adjusting my equipment and stuff like that, and he's standing there freezing, in addition to wanting to go, is the story. But this particular story is sort of the theme of what I want to talk about today, and I've told some people that it's ironic, but neither Arie and I have ever really developed a formal talk on regulatory mode. And that's because we've been doing a lot of other stuff, and for some crazy reason, that's not become one of our formal talks. So this was the first time I've ever created a talk on regulatory mode, which also means I don't know how long it is. And the other part about it is that this is a Festschrift, so who cares, right? The thing that's the theme here is in fact the case that in a lot of skiing that I've done with Arie, and not in this particular story, Arie in fact has kind of gone off the mountain in one way or the other, as Hannah has mentioned as well. And so you learn when you're his friend that you really have a responsibility to take on the other role. And so it is in fact this kind of complementarity, which is sort of the theme today, which is what I'll be talking about, is the fact that locomotion and assessment actually represent two of the major motivational systems for all of us. Locomotion being really about control, managing to make things happen, and assessment being about truth, establishing what's real, and those are, along with value, the three major motivational systems. And what we've found together is that what really matters is how they work together, how locomotion and assessment work together, and it's the working together that is really, I think, the most important story and general story about motivation.
Meeting Arie was not only the most defining event in my academic life, but also one of the most influential encounters in my life, period. Let me try to squeeze a lifelong relationship into a short salute. It was 1976. I was a senior undergraduate student at Tel Aviv University in the Department of Psychology, which at that time was a nice old-fashioned German school, or rather a cozy old-fashioned Eastern European school. Arie had just come back from a sabbatical year in the States. When he walked down the corridor with his tight jeans and heavy wooden clogs, it was like California glamour and style entering the shtetl, tiny Jewish village for those of you who don't know. Getting into Arie's undergraduate attribution seminar was clearly a ticket to the place where things were happening. As a matter of fact, it was like being admitted to a small revolutionary army. We quickly realized that Arie was not interested in teaching us how to grow and water a small plot within the already existing garden of attributions. No, the seminar was about reshaping the field, and if this required undoing or even dismantling some existing theoretical structures, so be it. As undergraduates, we did not even realize at the time how daring Arie was, tackling the lions of the social psychological pack. For instance, Hal Kelly in attribution or Don Campbell in research methodology. In fact, we did not even realize how relatively young Arie was at that time, because he was our undisputed epistemic authority. However, it was clear to us that as well-mannered and full of humor and style as he was also fearless and unyielding in the face of conventions, power, and status. As a master architect theoretician, Arie taught us to look for the most general, most elegant, and most parsimonious theoretical structures. Only later did I learn that before turning to psychology, Arie had in fact studied architecture, where less is more. His message was, be right, be persuasive, but also be daring and fearless, and don't cave into seniority or power. It took me several more years to realize that not everyone in the field shared Arie's enthusiasm for constant revolutions, a la Thomas Kuhn, Karl Popper, or Imre Lakatos, a name that only Arie knew at the time. Several weeks into the seminar, Arie declared that he was also interested in diving into cognitive consistency theories and possibly putting them under the same umbrella as attribution. So we formed an inner group who met with him also every Friday morning when no classes were being taught. And I remember entering the empty premises and feeling like a small unit of underground conspirators, this time challenging Leon Festinger. But this was relatively safe. He didn't care about dissonance anymore. And there were also some fringe benefits. We met sometimes in an ice cream parlor in Tel Aviv. All this points to the fact that several decades before studying radicalism and dangerous radicals, Arie was an academic free radical himself. So what distinguishes him from the many people he studied in different penitentiaries around the world? There are many differences, but I will mention only three. First, Arie is all too passionate for new knowledge, and he cannot really subscribe to any rigid dogma, including dogmas that he himself created. Second, his need for closure is not that high. In particular, he's not interested in closure within prisons that don't have good wines, great international food, international travel, great company, opportunities to master new languages, tennis courts, and good running trails. Third, and most importantly, there is his extraordinary sense of humor, which is embedded in everything he does, and which is clearly a no-no for any true radical. So here's my humble contribution to a theory of becoming a true violent radical. Quest for significance, yes. Dogmatism, yes. Need for closure, yes. Great intellectual drive, no. Incredible sense of humor, no and no. Thank you so much. Yonat and I are toasting to Arie.
It wouldn't be fair to spend all day talking about him without giving him a few minutes to say something himself. So please join me in welcoming and thanking Arie for everything that he's done.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you all very much. Thank you for coming here from different corners of the world, from Poland, Holland, Italy, Germany, Belgium, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and the different parts of the US of A. Thank you for your kind words and exciting talks. The only problem is that I would like some more of these talks. That's not enough. I can't end it like that. Thank you, Cousin Michel, for dreaming up this very idea of Festschrift. Thanks, Kata, Ed, and Marina for fantastic execution, and for members of my lab who carried out cheerfully all the tasks and logistics that were associated with this event. Finally, but not least importantly, greatest thanks go to Hannah, my wife, who always had my back, supported me through thick and thin, and had patience for my impatience. That is due to locomotion, I cannot help it. I consider myself extremely lucky to have you as my friends, my colleagues, my students, my postdocs. It's really a great honor to be associated with all of you. As I look around the room, the history of social psychology of the last 5 decades is written here. You have defined the research agenda for the field, the major theory, the major contributions, the major directions, and I feel extremely blessed to have been around you, have learned from you, have associated with you, have had dinners with you, and played tennis with you, and created together this wonderful enterprise called social psychology. So thanks very much. You all have some shared reality with me. We all together traveled different bits of the road, and you have been wonderful travel companions and very inspiring and characterized by warmth and competence together to a greatest degree. I also feel very fortunate for having chosen social psychology as my selected field of work. How did I come to social psychology? Well, even as a little boy back in Lodz, the picture you've seen, I dreamed about being a social psychologist. That's not true. As a matter of fact, my road to social psychology was nothing if not rocky, and it went through my experiences in architecture and in animal behavior. First, after being inspired by Ayn Rand, the Fountainhead, I wanted to be a great architect, Frank Lloyd Wright or something like that, and I went to study, at least Frank Lloyd Wright. I went to study architecture at the School of Architecture in Toronto. I finished first year somehow, and then I had the experience, or the good or bad luck, of being hired by an architect for the whole summer as a draftsman. And as a junior draftsman, my assigned task was to draw toilets. There were, this was an architect who was building huge high-rise buildings all over Toronto. So each high-rise had hundreds of apartments, and each apartment had at least one bathroom, and I had to draft all those bathrooms. So this was like Dante's subdivision of hell. I entertained seriously the possibility of hanging myself. But then I decided, I've got to look into this more carefully and more in depth, and I therefore must study psychology. The reason why I was so interested in psychology was that I thought that psychology is mysterious, it's romantic, that there are dreams and unconscious and all kinds of impulses that we are unaware of. And I learned about all of this, of course, from Hitchcock movies like Spellbound or Vertigo. So I ended up at the University of Toronto Psychology Department, where they were studying rats and pigeons. This was an era of neo-behaviorism and conditioning. So I quickly was disabused of my pipe dreams of psychoanalysis and depth psychology, and I was assigned a rat to train to press a bar. And however cute it was, very white with the pink lips, my rat, however, was Donald Trump would call a loser. Or maybe its teacher was a loser, more likely. I was trying to teach it to press a bar, and it wouldn't learn to do it. And So, you know, I was, as a locomotor, being very insistent. One day before the lab report was due, on Saturday evening, I was still lying on the floor trying to teach the rat to press a bar, and the rat escaped from the cage, and I was crawling around the floor to catch him. I finally caught him, and then the rat bit me. And then the light went in my head, and I heard a voice saying just 2 words: social psychology. And the rest is a commentary. You know, they say that a person with a hammer sees everything as a nail, and as a social psychologist, I see everything in social psychological terms. And even when I think about word politics, about radicalization, every piece of theater I see with Carol and David and Hannah, every film I see, I think as a social psychologist. I think about terms that you all created, you all concocted. I think in terms of promotion and prevention. I think in terms of tightness and looseness, incremental and entity mindsets. I think in terms of warmth and competence. I think in terms of social construction of reality. I think of temporal construal. I think of need for closure, locomotion, assessment sometimes. So in many ways, it's you that shapes the way I think and I view the world, and if there is anything wrong with that, you know who is to blame. But seriously, I do feel that social psychology is a field that allows us to understand the world in concepts that go beneath the surface, beyond a journalistic or historic description of event. Contents may differ across times, across places, but there are universal social psychological processes that explain history and world affairs, and these processes and these principles existed in the times of ancient Romans, and they exist now, and they'll exist forever. And that's what we are set out to discover, these general principles. So when after 9/11, I was recruited to the task of studying and understanding terrorism, and I met with my, from that time on, my long-term and very close friend, Rohan. I dared to jump into the fray and try to analyze and theorize about terrorism and radicalization, because I was equipped with a point of view, with a social psychological perspective that I find exceedingly useful. I think that social psychology has a great deal to contribute. As Ken once put it, it should play a coloratura role, the way he colorfully expressed it. And I think this is true. We have a lot to contribute in foreign policy, in education, in all walks of life. And I think, you know, I would like to see it happen, because I think that the knowledge we have is very unique and very important. Finally, and not the least important, I feel very important in my role as mentor of graduate students and postdocs who then move on to shake the world and become important figures, the likes of Ayelet Fishbach, the likes of John Jost, Małgorzata Kosowska, Chili Klar, Mark Deshen, Yenes Erb, Kata Kopets, Ed Rohek, Jocelyn Belanger, many others. You know, the composition of our lab changes all the time, but the magic that you create is always there, and it keeps us all excited and very engaged. And it's funny that Yankale mentioned it, but I do feel like Art Blakey of the Jazz Messengers. You know, he was the drummer that presided over changing cadres, changing generations of musicians who played the tunes. And I also feel very much, and I did it before I heard your incisive analysis, I feel very much like a drummer that is giving the beat, and they are the ones who make the music. So again, many thanks to all of you for coming and making this incredible party for me. I'm humbled by all of your work and all of your sentiments that you expressed, and I reciprocate them fully. And insofar as I have no intention of retiring and taking up fishing or growing radishes, perhaps we can replicate this Festschrift on an annual basis. How about it, Cousin Michelle? Thank you very much. And now to dinner.
It's very difficult, as I'm sure you all know if you've been trying to do this all day, to crystallize your thoughts about Arie in a toast, which probably is a phrase or something. And I've found it completely impossible, so I'm going to give a preface to my toast, and then I'll give my toast. Because I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience here and Arie's influence on this. I mean, I think I've been provost here for about 3 3/4 years. I've spent most of my career at the University of Texas and then came to Maryland as a provost, which is, it's kind of hard to come in at the senior level sort of blind to a university, and you have a lot to get to know and to understand as you come in, more than you realize, I think. But one of the very first units that I visited as provost was the START Center. I've never actually seen anything like it. It was such an incredibly impressive and clearly effective, important unit, and important because of the contribution it makes to the safety of our country, but also the contribution it makes to the educational experience of hundreds of students, undergraduates that work in the START Center, helping to actually explore all these things that are going on in the world and record them, keep track of them, analyze them, and then pass this information along to Homeland Security. It was just incredible. We talk all the time about how important experiential learning is to the learning environment of our students and how we should do much more of that. Well, the START Center is such an incredible example of that in action. And I didn't know until very recently that Arie was the person who established this center. Because when I visited, of course, this was just a few years ago, and he had passed the leadership on to a very wonderful colleague, Arie Lefree, and it was great. He was doing a great job of leading it, but anyway, Arie, we owe you a huge debt for that at the university and in the country, I think. I have never had as much fun looking at someone's resume and information about their career as I did yesterday and today, looking at all the work that Arie has done. Of course, I didn't look at all of it, but you look on the web and you find out all kinds of snippets. And then it leads you on to understanding more and more, or a little bit more, about various different topics. And I learned about regulation theory and I learned about closure analysis and this closure index. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong. And as I read about it, I realized how important these things are to understanding our own behavior and even to understanding difficulties that some students may be having with certain classroom structures and expectations. And then, of course, you move into terrorist motivation and what drives these mysterious people to do these amazingly horrible things to themselves and to other people. It's incredibly important and incredibly personal work. I got insights into my former husband's behavior while at the same time, and why he is my former husband, and at the same time, insights into what some students may be struggling with in the classroom and what may be motivating terrorists. It was an incredible learning experience, reading a biography. So, Arie, thank you. So here's my toast with my preface, but I didn't bring a glass. But Arie, thank you for all this amazing work, giving us insights into ourselves, into threats to our world, into our educational system, and helping us to understand how to do better and to combat these threats and have actually, oh good, thank you, more successful lives, personal lives. Thank you. I will add also, thank you for the honor and distinction that you bring to this university by being a part of our university family. Thank you.
One more picture.
Oh, picture. It's interesting, when I met Arie in Portugal, he was giving this seminar and the assigned reading was Dweck and Leggett. So we had to read that and discuss it for 3 days. It was the same paper that we discussed for 3 days. And then apparently, I don't know what I did, what kind of study I proposed, because Arie really wanted us to push that forward and propose new studies and new implications. So I don't know what I did, that he recruited me to come here. I also didn't understand the importance of that work at the time. It was only after I came here I understood the importance of Carol's work, not only the importance of her work, but her relationship to Arie. And it was only recently that I've learned that Carol was the sister that Arie never had. So please join me in welcoming Carol Dweck.
I think I'll stand. I wrote my remarks on a boarding pass in honor of Arie, my brother. When I saw there were 17 people before me who love Arie as much as I do, although that's probably not possible, I realized I had 3 choices. First, I could echo the sentiments that they expressed. Second, I could reveal Arie's deepest secrets. Like the time he fell asleep into his soup at an SPSP dinner. Michelle made me tell that one. Or the fact that he wakes up with that incredible smile that everyone talked about. I have that from a good source. Or, number 3, or I could write a poem. I chose number 3. So here we go. There once was a prof named Kruglanski who was known to have ants in his pantski. Intense locomotion plus fabulous notions, researched with tremendous elan ski. Motivation, it barely existed. But through thick and through thin, he persisted. Through seizing and freezing, closure and exposure, he showed that the field had it twisted. Motivation created behavior. The endogenous or exogenous flavor. Be it goals aimed at meanings or conservative leanings, Arie, it seemed, was our savior. So thank you, dear Dr. Kruglanski, from Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Oman ski. From a field and tradition that you've brought to fruition, and from us, your greatest of fanskis.
One of the great things about being close with Arie is being a part of this large family that's been constructed. So wherever you move around the world, you encounter another family member. And I've been fortunate in the last 4 years to have been hired at the University of Pittsburgh, where I have one of these family members, and John Levine, who I get to work with every day, be mentored by, and sort of protected by as a junior faculty member. So I feel through John a bit of Arie every day, and in my everyday life, I feel like I'm still a part of the family and protected and guided by a close family member. So in my life at Pittsburgh, I feel a very family-like connection to John, our next speaker, so he'll come and share his own thoughts.
Thanks, Ed. When I was thinking about making some comments, I wanted to prepare myself properly, get into the right frame of mind. And so what I did is I put on a suit and tie. I filled my fountain pen with ink. I turned on some classical music, and I opened a bottle of wine to reward myself later. So I then felt that I was ready to think hard about Arie. Just a footnote in regard to the suit. Arie, the suit not only inspired me in terms of my comments, but in fact it occurred to me that the fact I had the suit at all was due to Arie to some extent, because some years ago, Hannah and I and Jan and Arie were taking a walk through the mall, you may recall, and we went by a men's store, and there was a suit in the window, and everybody encouraged me to try it on. And I tried it on, and it fit relatively well, and everybody encouraged me to buy it. And I didn't buy it. And Arie said, why don't you want to buy the suit? And I said, well, Arie, I don't wear suits, I wear sport coats. And Arie said, John, you're old enough for your pants to match your jacket. Or maybe your pantski to match your jacket. So in any case, I thought of you, Arie, when I finally got around to buying it. Now, contrary to what you might imagine, giving a toast for Arie is not an easy task. One might think it would be quite easy. And there are at least two reasons for this, I think. One is that Arie has so many notable qualities that no matter how much praise you lavish on him, you're probably going to forget something. And you will then kick yourself in the morning because you didn't mention it. And for another thing, and I think this is relevant to what was said a couple of minutes ago by Carol, making one of the last toasts of the evening, probably most of what you want to say has been said, probably more eloquently before you. So there's really nothing to be done, I think, but to press on with this difficult but very happy task. So what I'd like to do then is to just make a couple of comments to elaborate perhaps a bit on things that others have said and I think that everyone feels. As a scientist, Arie's theoretical and empirical contributions to social psychology are remarkable by any standard. And his place as one of the truly distinguished members of our field is quite secure. Arie's work will endure for a very long time. In thinking about his work and the range of his work, and the chair of the department today gave us a quick list of at least the total number of Arie's papers and citations and so on, and I'm sure everybody has a favorite paper. I haven't read everything Arie has written, but I've read a lot of what Arie has written. And if I had to make a choice, I think my favorite would be one of the psychological review papers that was mentioned today, the 2006 paper that Arie wrote with colleagues in Rome on groups as epistemic providers with Antonio Piero and Lucia Minetti and Araldo de Grada. I assigned this paper for a graduate course in small groups that I teach, and I assigned it for two reasons. One reason I assigned it is because the content is quite relevant, and I think it's an important paper about groups. And the second reason I assign it is because I think it's an excellent model for students to see how a programmatic line of research can evolve and develop. And to me, this paper showcases many of the features of Arie that make him such an important contributor to our field. The development of a generative theory from which one can derive a wide range of interesting and novel hypotheses, and then the ability to design elegant experiments to test these hypotheses and to create a contribution which is rich, is deep, and which really provides a new and exciting perspective on some older problems that others have perhaps stopped studying. So I think that this is and this is only one example of this kind of thing, but it's one that I find particularly appealing given my interests. As a person, as we all know, Arie has many, many outstanding qualities. And the ones that come to mind to me most readily are erudite, charming, warm, and funny. And several people have commented on Arie's sense of humor, and it's really something that's especially appealing to those of us who have an opportunity to spend time with him. And what's truly amazing to me is not only does he have all these qualities, but he manifests them all at the same time. So if you're listening to a talk or you're going out to dinner, you see all these features within a relatively short period of time. As others have said, he's a wonderful person to go to a film with, to go to a museum with, to have dinner with, to go to a play with. And if you spend time with Arie, you'll often do all of these things in one day, because Arie does not like dead time. And as soon as we arise in the morning at his house, we are planning our day. And we all have to move rather briskly in order to get everywhere that we're supposed to go. And there's one other personal quality or pair of personal qualities about Arie that particularly endear him to me, which is that he helps me to both think better and feel better. So on both the cognitive and affective dimensions, he's extremely helpful. We've all had experiences where we float an idea with him and it becomes immensely enriched as a function of a half hour, an hour's conversation. And his warmth and his humanity always lifts my spirits. So it's always a pleasure to interact with him. So I'd like to offer a two-part toast to Arie. The first is a congratulatory toast for all that he has accomplished in social psychology. And the second is an anticipatory toast for all that he will continue to contribute to social psychology. So, to Arie.
Our last toaster today, in person at least, is Wolfgang Ströbe. And it's very hard to talk about Wolfgang and Arie, and also very easy. Wolfgang told me that there's nothing special or funny or interesting about the way they met. But I can tell you that however they met, uninterestingly, not funny, this has developed in an amazing relationship. One that I cannot describe, but I've been witness to many amazing moments. This is one of them. In front of their favorite cafe in St. Moritz. I can't even tell you how much a coffee costs there. But this is just one of the moments. Some of my favorite moments are sitting down with Wolfgang and listening to his stories about Arie, and I'm sure we're gonna hear some of them. And some of my least favorite moments is sitting at the dinner table with them. It's unbelievable how you feel about their knowledge of food and wine, and I think I know something about food and wine, but these two make me feel like a complete ignorant. So try to avoid that. Anyway, I'm not gonna say anything. I'll let Wolfgang tell his story about Arie and everything that this relationship means to him.
It's not really a great picture of me, I think. But
it doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay. I'm not going to talk about what a great scientist Arie is, because he knows it, I know it, and anybody here who doesn't know it by now will not find out in these last minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some of the experiences we had. I went through old photo albums, getting totally dusty of pictures we have taken over the years together. Basically, Arie and I met in 1981 when Arie had founded an association of Israeli social psychologists, and I was president of the European Association of Social Psychologists. And at that time, Israeli social psychologists mainly worked with US social psychologists. There was practically no contact with Europe, and Arie's idea was that that should change, and we should create a number of meetings of European and Israeli social psychologists. They were great meetings, but before we started the meetings, we had some meetings in Tübingen, where I lived in those days, and we would plan the meetings we would have together. Arie looked like that. We were all a bit younger then, not surprisingly, naturally, it was 30 years ago. In those days, Arie was not yet a wine connoisseur. He used to enjoy simple wines rather than expensive ones. So that, for example, he couldn't get enough of Schwäbische Trollinger, which he would not touch these days naturally, because it's It's a local wine, but then he did enjoy it. By the way, on the side, Chuck, that is Leslie, that was in the time. Chuck Stanker was a postdoc with me in Tübingen. Then we had a number of conferences, and around the conferences we also had some vacations, and one of the memorable ones was in Eilat, where we had a great deal of fun. Arie there embarrassed me in front of my daughter. That is from a album my daughter gave to me at my 50th birthday, and she wrote, if it hadn't been for heroic Arie, I wouldn't happily be holding my water ball. On that picture, normally it is a father who retrieves the daughter's ball, not friends, especially not while the father slowly takes off his shorts so as not to get them wet in the sea. Arie didn't care, he jumped in to the water in his clothes. I mean, that, having talked about locomotors, is quite, he's sort of embarrassed. I mean, all I was doing, you know, it was a sandy beach. I mean, it's totally normal that you sort of try to find a stone on which you could put your clothes, but while I was searching for that stone, Arie had jumped into the water in his clothes and picked up, and my daughter has never forgotten that. She's his greatest fan, but it was slightly embarrassing for me. Now, many vacations followed. We were in San Francisco in 1986. We were in Paris. Those are only the ones I found pictures in Paris around 1994. In Venice in 1996. That was actually, we were having lunch at the seaside, and Ken Gergen, who also joined us, was standing in front of a gondola, sort of riding towards our restaurant. It was quite impressive. Ravello in 2014. We also had joint celebrations together, Christmas at the Gergens. We all dressed up a bit in tuxedos. Here is Ken Gergi dramatically. Then we had Arie's 75th birthday celebration in London. That's in the Caledonian Club, actually, with Hannah. And that is in the Ritz, and Hannah had organized that for him, and it was an absolutely mind-blowing, fantastic occasion. Big Christmas trees. The doors wouldn't open automatically as they do in the States. At each door there were two doormen standing, opening them up for you. It costs you a bit more naturally, but it's absolutely worth the experience. We were also present while Arie learned to dance. That took quite a while. You can see here that he's being taught by a master, but it really took him some time to catch on. Also, women had to help him and show the movements, but finally, by God, he got it and could do it himself. Yeah, and you can actually see Carol here also. Okay, now sports keeps us young. Here I don't know what they are doing. That is Maggie and Hannah sort of keeping young successfully, I might add. Then we had a boat race in Pennsylvania. Apparently it was the Brandywine River. Now, if you go on a race with Arie, the problem is that naturally Arie wants to win the race. I mean, you can't go on a race with Arie. Now, Arie's problem was that I really canoed quite a lot when I was young, and basically when you guide a canoe through a river, you have to read the waters, and you don't really have to do much. You just have to know where you go. That's how it started out. We were sort of getting slightly into the mood of the whole thing. Now, Arie absolutely tried to win, but my boat would have been faster, except that I had a co-pilot who wouldn't sort of totally be committed to winning. So, as a result, we only came in second, and Arie was so delighted that he stepped out of the boat and totally fell into the water over his head. It was absolutely wet, but afterwards we had a skiing celebration, and I mean it was a great experience, and I think it would have been not nice winning myself, because Arie enjoys winning much more than I do. So it would have been selfish of myself if I had beaten him. Skiing together in Switzerland, actually most recently even in Austria. Here is Arie, that is in Austria. And one of my earliest experience skiing with Arie was in Wengen. That must have been 20 years ago. And in those days in Wengen, only the children had ski helmets. And Arie did come, Arie did come with a ski helmet, and we went up a T-bar lift, the Eiger Nordwand lift, and that is really, I mean, they have stopped it in the meantime. It's incredibly scary, and the last bit sort of goes up like that. And Arie, being a locomotor, not an assessor, stepped out of the T-bar before we had been at the top, fell down the slope in an incredible speed. If he hadn't had a helmet, he would have been dead. He hit the wall, and his helmet got bashed in us. The problem was they couldn't get him up again because it was so steep it would have been dangerous for people to walk down. So they stopped the lift on ropes and sort of clinging themselves in. I mean, like rock climbers. We had the view of the Eiger Nordwand behind us. They went down and they picked Arie up. Now the problem was I was standing up there with a lot of Swiss, and the Swiss, German Swiss, are not sort of the nicest people, and they started saying, why didn't the father take care of his kid? How could and they were sort of all looking at me, and I got worried. It was sort of a lynch mob. And that poor boy, he could have been killed, which is totally true. He could have been killed. But the idiot shouldn't have stepped off the T-bar too early. But I couldn't say that because everybody thought that was my little son, and I had abandoned him. So, but now that's typical Arie, you know. He finally came up, his helmet totally bashed in, and he said, let's do it again. But I should add, it's typical for me, I've never gone on a T-bar with Arie again after that. Okay, thank you.
It's a big honor being here. As you know, it was risky because it was not easy to get my visa since I've been to Iran. So, but anyway, I don't remember exactly when we met the first time. It should be sometimes between 20 and 25 years ago, I guess. I think I was, my memory is that I was out of the department for a year. I was in UK. And I came back, and I remember the department was like, it was a special atmosphere, because they were talking about the person that they met, they invited, and apparently it has striking the department in a very unusual way. But at that time, I think we did, our contact developed very slowly. And actually, I think I had a different experience from those that have been recalled this morning and this afternoon. Actually, I think I met you first as a bon vivant rather than as a... I was going to use that. So So we shared a lot of goals like wines, food, wonderful places, etc. And later on, slowly, we shared, I think we realized that we could share also some other goals like doing research, finding some new joint activities in academics. So I'd like to share a couple of thoughts that I was writing this morning, early this morning, as you told us. So we have in Italy an Italian proverb which says "prima il dovere, poi il piacere." That would be first beauty, then pleasure. And actually, it doesn't sound very much Italian. Usually, it's quite the reverse for us: first pleasure and then rest. But the reason I'm quoting here this proverb is to stress that with Arie, I would not say to work, I would say to share some realities, to share reality. And actually working with him, the experience in fact is that such an antinomy actually doesn't work. It vanishes like snow melting in the sunshine, because the working beauty becomes pleasure, and actually the pleasure is the beauty, as I think was already quite clear today in the morning and the afternoon. I think one of the reasons for Arie's enduring successful relationship with Italy, with Italians, academics, he's not simply wonderful masters Italian language, but he's able to perfectly interpret, I think, many of our cultural idiosyncrasies, and to turn them actually magically into powerful knowledge adventures. I don't know why, but you managed to do this. I can see that since the early 90s, that means for over 25 years, Arie visited regularly our departments. I know also other Italian universities. We have Dino Giovannini here from Modena and from Trento. I know Arie working with Bologna with Monica Rubini, and maybe with many people in Italy, which I can't remember right now. But I can tell you about Rome, and I'm very glad that John Levin before mentioned that paper, because everything started about 25 years ago with Raldo Lido de Grada, when he invited, I think, for the first time in the early 90s, Arie in Rome for seminars. And from there, most importantly, that it developed a strong and alive years after year relationship. And Arie honestly gave a terrific contribution in helping our academic group, specifically social psychology in Italy, but specifically social psychology in Rome, to reach the peak in national ranking for social psychology, as it actually is. I mean, it's really the result, the astonishing result of our department, which is nowadays probably the first one in social psychology, or one of the first in Italy. It's partly thanks to Arie collaborations. So he managed to collaborate with almost all social psychologists in our department. So, usually when we have someone coming from other countries, usually what happens is that the person works with 1-2 persons. But Arie did, what no one did before. I mean, he managed to basically work with all the social psychologists in our department in Rome. So let me list, I may forget some of them, but let me list the main one I remembered this morning. So Gerardo de Grada is first of all, and then Antonio Piero, Lucio Vannetti, Antonio Chirumbolo, Stefano Livi, Gilda Sensales, Sandra Reni, Anna Kosic, more recently myself, and many other colleagues. And on top of this, an endless number of postdocs, PhD, master students. Enrico Molinario is here in these days, in these months. So such a strong, massive, and close collaboration grew up across more than a quarter of a century. It produced journal articles, chapters, conference paper. So I'm very pleased to remember here that exactly 1 month ago, it was the 11th of May, actually we had the final signature from the provost here and from our rector, which established a formal agreement between Maryland University and State University for our specific departments. And I think this is a remarkable achievement, not only from a bureaucratic and formal point of view, but also will give access to new resources, which I'm sure in the following years will help us to spur even further our joint collaboration. So let me now pay homage to Arie's way of living and creating shared realities. It has been done already a lot in the previous hours today. But I want to give a more Italian contribute to this. And let me refer, it has been already compared to many figures, sportsmen, even Indiana Jones today in the afternoon. So let me recall here how Dante Alighieri, you may know, one of the best Italian poets that dates 7 centuries ago, in his masterpiece, La Divina Commedia, this poet imagined, as you know, to do a long travel across the hell, the purgatory, and the paradise. At a certain point, he met Ulysses. And Ulysses, for him, represents on many different lights and aspects the importance of knowledge and discovery, and especially the endless motivation and effort to reach them, to reach discoveries and new knowledge, up to the extreme consequences. And let me quote a couple of passages, first in Italian, then I will give you the English version. Né dolcezza di figlio, né la pietà del vecchio padre, né il debito amore alla qual doveva Penelope far lieta, vince il potere dentro a me l'ardor che io ebbe di venire dal mondo esperto, e degli vizi umani e del valore. So, nor fondness for my son, nor reverence for my old father, nor the due affection which Joyce should have my Penelope, could overcome with me the desire I had to be experienced of the world, and of the vice and beauty of mankind. And again, considerate la vostra semenza, fatti non foste a vivere come bruti, ma per seguire virtute e conoscenza. That means, consider well the seed they gave you birth. You were not made to live as brutes, but to follow virtue and knowledge. Now, the poet, Dante Alighieri, actually thought that he was admiring Ulysses for this strong stride for knowledge and discovery, but actually used Ulysses' testimony to claim a more balanced approach to the role of knowledge in human life, and to warn about its excesses and dangers. And I think today we have the grateful witnesses from all the people that worked with Arie, that Arie managed to manage this lesson, to interpret this lesson, and to reach a real balance between astonishing research result and a wonderful life balance. So let me close with a small postscriptum. Among many activities I shared with Arie, let me remember here one, most of all, which I think epitomizes Arie's ways of socially creating knowledge by melting away the distinction among duty and pleasure, namely the already mentioned at the Spring Conference of Social Psychology, which he continuously co-organized with Wolfgang Strober and Fritz Strack across the last decade. I'm grateful that Fritz this morning remember that the next one will be continued next year. But I want to recall the first one of the new series in 2006. You may remember that we were in St. Moritz, it was the first edition. You actually convinced me to come there, which was a great stuff. And in that edition, I remember we were enjoying the discovery of many different grappas, and especially those made by Berta. Berta is a fine grappa maker in Italy. So it's my pleasure today, this evening, to introduce you now to the new Berta Grappa di Amarone. So, thank you very much.
All right, so I've been nominated to speak on behalf of all of Arie's current students. As I said, I'm David Weber. You may also know me as the guy who bumped the light switch on the way out in the middle. Let's talk, turn all the lights off. Also the Uber driver for hire. I'm not quite sure how we're going to follow that. Most of us weren't born before you guys met Arie. We don't have good pictures. Everything's already been said. So we decided to do an interpretive dance to tell you guys how much we love Arie. That would be great, but we don't have that, I'm sorry. After a full day of insight into how Arie's influenced all of us in this room and his vast impact on the field, we kind of thought it would be fitting to give you an insight into kind of the unique experience that we have as his students, the kind of bits of information that we're privy to that other people maybe don't get to see. And we're going to keep it a little bit more on Arie's words of wisdom that are a little more unconventional. They might not all be profound, but we'll go with them. Okay. So what we've learned from Arie. We've learned that it's possible to travel 366 days out of the year. Something he recently shared with two of his students, Hannah and Jess, is that we need to keep stretching. You know, you get older, your body just doesn't work the way it always did before. If you want to age gracefully, you got to keep limber. No, of course not. He's really speaking about the process of synthesizing, right? Ideas and concepts. Once you've stretched a concept to the point where you think that you've hit a wall and nothing else can fit in that concept, stretch further, right? Break out of your comfort zone, and that's where great synthesizing happens. That's where great theories will happen. We've learned to always say yes. We've learned to only read on a need-to-read basis. Just this week, we learned that empirical studies are meaningless. Having devoted our lives to studying empirical psychology, and I personally study terror management theory, this was not at all an existential threat. To me, it didn't make me question the purpose of my existence in any way, shape, or form. But the full story here is actually important. It's that empirical studies are meaningless on their own, okay? They're the building blocks of good theory. We should not design a cool or sexy study that used to get into psych science before they started caring about methodology. Good theory should be theory-driven, or good studies should be theory-driven, and their purpose is to support the big ideas in the world. On their own, they are quite meaningless without theory. Throughout today, we've learned that there's almost nothing that Arie can't conquer, whether it's the field of psychology, whether it's the ski slopes, the tennis courts, getting a black belt in karate, okay? Well, I traveled with Arie to the Philippines recently, and I think I found his foe that finally beat him, okay? Not what you would expect. It was an unexpected foe. It was a glass door. Now, to be fair, this glass door was really clean, right? And doors have a reputation for being difficult and shifty. You don't always know where they're gonna be, but he did run right through this glass door. So he can conquer everything but a glass door. Finally, one of my favorite pieces of advice that he gave me early on was always nudge. People will never do things for you in a time frame that you need without a bit of poking or prodding. I'm sure we've all been on the receiving end of Arie's nudging. I know that I have. Whether I'm taking too long to write a book chapter, analyze data, send an email, schedule a tennis reservation. The typical things that postdocs do. I think, Arie, this today might be our subtle way of nudging you back. It's throwing a Festschrift before your career has ended. Might be a little nudge that it's time to call it quits. But as the people who work with you every day, we know you haven't lost a step at all. So that's not what's going on. I think if there is any nudging here, it's because you're our biggest competition. We know that we'll never reach your heights. And while you're doing this, some of us study terrorism too. We study need for closure. We do motivated cognition. With you out of the game, we might get some of that government money ourselves. So I think that might be going on here. Those are a few of the lessons we've learned, but in all honesty, and I think I speak for everybody up here, we've truly learned a lot from you, Arie. We look forward to continue learning from you years to come. Personally, I've been honored to work with you over the last few years. Easily the best experience of my short academic career. When new students come to work with you, I think it can be intimidating, knowing that you're going to work with someone of your stature. You are someone of a rare breed. Of course, you're a brilliant experimentalist, theorist. But what I was surprised to find is how good of a person you are. Sorry. You're modest, you're funny, you're caring, and you're supportive. I'll always be thankful of our time and the relationship that I have with you. So with that, thank you, Arie. Yeah. Now, we're not done. We also got you a present.
And you have to come up here
So
to get
we'd
it.
like you to come up here so we can give you this present. This is not only a gift from us, but it was a group effort from all of your former students. Maxime was really the organizing force behind this, so we'll have him give this to you.
Wow.
Now can you open it? This is your next challenge.
Looks like a bottle of wine.
You do have to open it.
You do have to open it.
I have to open
You have to
Yes.
open it.
Oh my God.
Here, I'll hold it. You open it.
How do you open it?
I think you can tear.
Assessors don't open.
Locomotors open.
It's a need for openness.
Need for openness. Look at this.
So you may not be able to see it from there, and you're probably thinking, why the hell did these people give him a picture of himself? Right? Like, how ego-driven can this one man be? Okay, if you look closely, what this is it's a mosaic. Okay, the picture of Arie is made up of small photos of all of his former students. Okay? This is meant to represent your legacy, Arie. When you look back on your career, it's a reminder of all the people whose lives you've touched and whose research you have directly influenced. Your contribution to the field is not only in your work, but in the people that you've trained to carry on your mantle. For your students, it's a reminder to us that wherever we go, whatever we accomplish will always be a piece of you, and that will give us a leg up in the world just because of that. So I think that's all of us as former students could be something to be, proud of. So once again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.